Hey everyone, it's Pamela Ferguson, and today I wanted to talk all about how do you save and pay for college. This is a tough one because college costs have skyrocketed in recent years, and unfortunately students have come out with tremendous amounts of student loan debt. And I just want to talk about today some things that as a parent, I wish I would have known years ago to change my mentality of thinking about college. First of all, for years, I had the mentality of my kids are really smart, they have great grades, they're gonna get scholarships, and we're gonna basically have their college paid for. You know, I have since learned that most of the major academic scholarships are based on your SAT, ACT scores, really a high amount of that and not necessarily your grades. So I had the misconception that since my kids were amazing with their grades, they would get these scholarships and we wouldn't owe that much for college. That was misconception number one, or a myth in my mind. And if you have children who do not really excel at test taking, even if they're a fantastic, amazing student, child, they are not going to be able to get these scholarships. The scholarships from the schools, like the academic, the free rides, which I thought, oh yeah, well, they'll be able to get these academic scholarships. And so when I was saving for college, I had that really limitation on my mind about what I should be doing. First of all, you've probably heard it when you're deciding to, and I've done a video on it myself, should I save for retirement or college? And they always say you should save for retirement first because you can't get a student loan for college, which in principle, I do agree with that. However, I have learned some other features as well. Unfortunately, the student loans that you are having to get for the college education are just brutal. First of all, let me tell you that at least in our state, and I think in many states across the country here in 2021, colleges at a state school, this is not private, for 4 years all in, room and board, expenses, whatever, we're talking about $100,000 to $125,000. Okay, let me take a moment so your brain can process that. $100,000 to $125,000. There are some of you out there who started a 529 plan or a college savings plan when your kids were young, and you're like, yeah, I'm ahead of the game and they're gonna get these scholarships and it's gonna be amazing. That was me. I had no understanding of how much money it actually took to put children through college. I had no idea, no full concept of it. I thought I did, but I did not. So $100,000 to $125,000 at a state school in my state. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less in your state. Please do your research to find that out, but be aware way before you're applying for colleges and you're considering how to pay for this. So during our years as raising children, we didn't always have a lot of extra money. So we weren't, even though we had the 529 plans from when they were very young, we weren't always able to contribute. And we would try, when we did have extra money, we're like, well, we had to put it toward our retirement because you can't get a student loan for your retirement, which is true. So when we had to make a decision, it's like, okay, student loan or student savings or, retirement, we would generally try to flip more toward the retirement. But because of that fact, and also not having the opportunity to be able to contribute sometimes for several years, our 529 plan was much lower than we probably originally had anticipated. We thought that we'd be able to contribute on an ongoing basis and the money would grow very well, but for financial reasons or retirement decisions or whatever it is, maybe the amount that we had saved for our child for college is a lot less than we thought that we would have. So there's two things now. Number one, I thought that my children would be getting academic scholarships. Didn't happen. Asterisk. I'll revisit that one later. Number two, I thought I'd be able to save some more for college. Life happens, right? And the next thing that really should be number three is that I did not really fully understand the actual cost of schooling. So in your state, you have to take a look at the scholarships that are available to you. So in my state, we do have a couple levels of scholarships. So if you get this GPA and you rank this percentage in your class, you get this much a year. If you rank this, you get this much. But just to know, in my state, that doesn't even cover full tuition at a state school. It's great money and it's very welcomed, but it doesn't cover even just the tuition, let alone the room and board and other expenses. Now, there are some states that I am aware of that we've lived in previously that do. Their scholarships the high scholarship covers all of tuition. So check with your state to see what that is. It may vary. And there's also a state that I've lived in where there were no state scholarships by the state at all. So there were none. Now, there are obvious ways that you can get a little bit more money is you can apply for scholarships, and not state scholarships or anything where you actually apply, they're 500, 1,000, 2,000, whatever they are, where usually the child has to write an essay and they have to do things like that. I would definitely recommend that. And the school resources is usually amazing at giving them options of finding scholarships for that. If your teen works, make sure they put money aside to be able to, toward your 529 plan, or just even set aside for expenses. So when we say, okay, let's say you've saved $50,000 in a 529 plan, which I think is pretty darn good, pretty good. And let's say your school has no scholarships. So you're making up the difference between the 50 and the 100. This is just an example, obviously, but I'm just going to talk about different ways to make up the difference between whatever you've saved, if anything, and the cost of tuition. Okay, so the first one is hopefully your teen has worked, as I mentioned, and helped contribute toward it, or is contributing now toward it. Maybe they could work while in school. If they're a sophomore above, maybe they could be an RA to help offset the housing cost. That's all a big help. Just to know that if you had whatever amount you had saved, the 50,000 in my example or whatever it is, if you know right from the beginning that that's not going to be enough to pay for their education, you have to start thinking, okay, where is the difference going to come up with? And I mentioned working and doing things like that. So there are lots of different loans you can get. The first one that will be usually directly in the offer that you get from the college, you will get an offer of an unsubsidized loan, and right now the maximum is $5,500 a year. Keep in mind that unsubsidized loan starts accruing interest immediately, even while you're attending school. It is not one of those ones that you don't have to start making payments till 6 months after you graduate, but the interest still accrues, and it's also compound interest. And compound interest where it usually these loans compound monthly. So if you borrowed 100 and the first month you owe 105, the next month you owe 150 or 111, and the next month. So before you even begin paying what you borrowed 100, now you owe 200, just for example. And so that can be really defeating, I guess, because you think that you borrowed 100, but when you start paying, it's a lot more than that. So as a parent, I would say try to at least keep up with their interest while they're in school. If you can do that, try to. I think it's really important. You've got your 529 plans or any sort of college savings. You've got the working. And how can kids save money while going to college? There's a lot of things they can work. They can be an RA. They can reduce their expenses, simple as that. And depending on the administration, like currently we are at a situation with the administration that they have like a moratorium on interest. So right now we have our student loan that is not accumulating interest. So I was making payments anyway, but now I'm like, it's amazing because I'm able to 100% go straight to the principal, and I'm not having to pay off any interest currently. It's just it's a time period that will be a forbearance of this, that they won't have to pay it and it may switch in, but that is a good thing for the student. Now, keep in mind that the prices of $100,000 to $125,000 is what I was talking about for a four-year state school. Lots of other options for students out there if you really, really cannot swing this. Making the choice of going to a community college for all of your prerequisites and basics, and then moving on to a traditional four-year college is an excellent, excellent choice. And honestly, if you're only looking at finances, that's the way to go. There's like no question. That is the way to go. However, there are a lot of other factors that go into that. It's the college experience, the athletics, all of those things that go into learning to deal and live with other people that are strangers, expanding your ideas that you may not get as much of if you go to community college, because it doesn't quite have the same type of campus feel. Maybe if somebody's interested in sororities or fraternities, there's that option that a community college doesn't allow you to have. However, if you're strictly talking financial, the best financial decision, hands down, community college. The level of education in community college versus the traditional colleges, first of all, most of them are the same professors. So you literally have somebody who teaches at both. So the quality of education is excellent at community college. Maybe 30 years ago, that wasn't always the case. Usually you had your better professors and instructors at the more higher four-year university. That's not really true anymore. That's not true anymore. So that is definitely something to consider. I understand that there is that college experience, but something to be said, if you want an education and you just do not have resources for any loans to be able to co-sign community college, they continue to work. They maybe don't take full-time classes. Maybe it takes them 6 years to graduate. That's okay. That's okay. The process doesn't look the same for everyone. And that doesn't make someone less than, it doesn't make someone less smart. Actually, in some ways, I think it makes them smarter. Definitely financially smart. They will come out with much, much less debt than their counterparts who went to a four-year university. If you are lucky enough to have been able to save and afford it and all those things, that's great. However, if not, you should seriously consider 2 years at the community college and then moving on to the university, the traditional university. And if you've got grad school, that's a completely different, an additional amount of funds that you will have to save for. So it can be completely overwhelming. And when deciding which school you should choose, some major factors, beyond community college and four-year traditional university, is what is your career? What do you want to be when you grow up, so to speak? Do you want to be a teacher and your starting salary where you want to teach us $35,000? You probably shouldn't spend $150,000 on your education, right? Do you want to be an engineer and your starting salary is $150,000? There's things to consider like that. So, okay, how much are you going to make when you get out? If you get a job too, it's not even guaranteed. So how much is your average starting salary in the area that you want to live in? That's really something to consider. Probably if you want to be a teacher, you should not go to some small liberal arts school where the tuition is like $200,000 to be a teacher where you're making $40,000. That is not the best choice for your education. Your financial. It's not the best financial choice for your education, I will say that. Because the stress that you put on yourself for years to come with such crazy amounts of debt is horrible. Horrible for your finances, horrible for your planning on your financial future, horrible for your retirement, horrible for starting a family. All of these things set you back. So you have to be really careful in deciding where you want to go to school. It's not as simple as, hey, this is the best school I want to go to and my friends are going there and I've always wanted to go there. There's so many other factors that go into it, especially when you're talking finances. You have to really look on what you want to do. Are you going to go to grad school? Is there a good grad school connected to that university? Or, all these things you need to consider. And as a parent, I really had no idea about so many of these things, specifically the cost of education and the loans that would be required for me, for my student and me as a parent. Or I think that I would have tried to save more, or I just would have had a different mentality. At least I would have been aware until the moment that I'm getting the letter from the university that says, you know, hey, we're not offering you anything, but you know, you get $5,500 unsubsidized. Of course, we got the state scholarship, but that doesn't come through the school, that's the state. And the fact that, you know, if my daughter graduated with like a 4.7, I'm thinking, well, she's gonna have some sort of academic scholarship, but it just wasn't the case there. If you are thinking that your child's college is going to be paid for, they're gonna have a scholarship because they have a great academic performance, please be aware that that is not the case unless that they score amazing on the SAT, ACT. And even then, there's such a high competition for those scholarships, you still may not get one. So please be aware, if you're relying on that fact that you don't need to save as much money, or you don't need to think as far ahead, or we can choose this expensive school, and then you commit and then you're like, oh my gosh, I really had no understanding of it. And I'm hoping and praying that my learning experience will help you avoid the same mindset, false mindset of not really knowing what to expect. So I hope you learned something today. It's a little convoluted and there's a lot of information, but hopefully you don't fall into the same pitfalls I did when looking into colleges and dealing with the finances. So I'll see you next time. Bye.